So, as Holly said, we are Sandy and Jeff Ashba, and we are the organic farm at Bear Creek. We happen to be on the Ohio side of the river, so don't hold that against us, but we are Oak members. We're very, very happy to be here, and we really enjoy Oak and the programs that they have, and we participated in a number of them, the farm tours and so forth. So we're going to take a little time this morning and go through a series of points and topics and hacks, if you will, that we've employed on our farm or that we think might be beneficial, particularly to small farmers. If you've got a small plot, a backyard kind of garden, container growing, that sort of thing, hopefully you'll pick up some things from this. As we go through it this morning, if you've got a question, please just raise your hand. You know, we don't have to wait till the end. We've got an hour here. We're going to try and save some time for Q&A at the end, but we will also take questions as we go. If something's not clear, you want to elaborate on it, or if you've got a comment that's something that you've done that is relative to what we're showing here. So what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk a little bit about field preparation, companion planting, feeding the soil, pollination, pest mitigation, weed control, and some farm hacks. If you participated in an earlier Oak conference this year, you saw one of our farm hacks on there along with a bunch of other pretty neat things. So we're going to cover some of those. A little bit of backstory on us. We've been at this for 18 years. We have 51 acres over on the Ohio side. It's nestled at the back, at the end of a dead-end road. It's quite hilly, quite wooded. We've got 3 different growing areas that we grow in. We've got a greenhouse, a seed room, the usual things that you find on a small farm. And we also have a cannery. We do value-added products. We do quite a bit in the way of salsas, soups, salad dressings, jams, and those are sold at retail outlets throughout the greater Cincinnati area. In addition to Sandy and I, there is our son, Derek, daughter-in-law, Libby, and our 13-year-old grandson, Dalton, that all kind of help us out on this family farm endeavor. A little bit of pictures from the farm. What you see in the upper left-hand corner, that's Bear Creek. We have our own little waterfall. We have a lot of high school students and grade school students that come out and visit the farm, and one of the things they enjoy is spending time on the creek, and it is just loaded with fossils. So that's kind of a neat little thing that we like to have people do. Our farm, we're about the 5th, maybe the 6th owners of this property. The original owners from back in the 1800s, their grave sites are actually on the property. So that's kind of a little special area that we take care of and keep it preserved. So it's a historic piece of ground, and we kind of like to keep it that way. Start off in preparation. This should all be pretty familiar to you all, but you know, cover cropping, we do a lot of that. Because we're heavily wooded, we collect a lot of leaf litter, and we will put that on the field. We'll chop that up and put that in to amend the soil. Where we are in southern Ohio, we have a lot of heavy clay soil. But the more leaf litter we can put into it, and the more cover crop residue we can put in, the better our soil is going to be. And we've been continuing to do that every year for the 18 years. One of the things we do in the spring, we take a molasses solution and we will spray it on the field, wake up all the little bugs and microbes and everything that are down in the soil. And that's worked real well for us. Planting, we do a lot of companion planting. We do a lot of planting in borders and intercropping of things for pollination and to help control disease. Down there at the bottom, you'll see the book called Carrots Love Tomatoes. If you're not familiar with that book, I would get it. It's an excellent book. And it talks all about crops that like each other and crops that don't like each other, so that you don't have to rely on pesticides so much, and so you will benefit both the crops that go in there. Again, with a lot of pest control using crops, we do a lot of intercropping with marigolds particularly. The only downside is that the marigolds will tend to grow bigger than they usually do because of the inputs we put on the crop. So you can get some pretty giant marigolds out of it, but it works really well. We grow a lot of herbs that we sell, and those herbs are also very beneficial in controlling insects and controlling some of the diseases and pests you're going to find on the field. You know, the reference book down there, 1001 All Natural Secrets to a Pest-Free Property. So highly recommend that also as a very good reference book for you. In feeding the soil, one of the best things that you can get, and it's free, is the snow, because of some of the minerals that come down in the snow, and let it sit on the field, and it is really good to put some valuable nutrients back in the soil. We do a lot of composting. Having a cannery on the farm, and all of our vegetable scraps, tomatoes, peels from everything, go into our compost with some soil. We flip it and turn it regularly, and that becomes an additive into our fields.
Do you just like have a big pile? You know,
We do.
Just a big pile of leaves in compost, and you turn that.
We do. We've got a pile. Actually, we took some old panels that are 3 foot by 8 foot and made a U shape out of them, and then the vegetable scraps go in there. We periodically put some dirt on top of it. We'll put some paper scrap, cardboard, newspaper, whatever it might be. It's open, so it gets rain, it gets sunshine, and we will flip it regularly. Just come in with the front loader on the tractor and keep turning it over. And sometimes we'll put that back in the soil, but more often than not, it's what we put into our potting mix when we're starting our plants. And we will make our own potting mix. We will use part of that compost, we'll use part peat moss, and we'll use some vermiculite or perlite to help retain moisture. And one of the other little things, we've got if you're familiar with a concrete mixer, a little portable concrete mixer, it's got a drum, a little motor. We put all that in there, we turn it on, mix it all up, scoop it out of there, and that becomes our potting mix that we use when we start all of our own plants.
Another thing we do is we put our vegetable scraps at the end of the season directly into the field. I don't encourage that through the summer because of course you're going to get your rodents, you might draw your groundhogs, but once we get our cover crop in at the end of the season, as we continue to produce in our cannery, we'll take those scraps and we just literally waste them in the field and let them lie there all winter, and then of course it's incorporated back into the soil.
We do a lot of planting, particularly border planting, to attract pollinators. We make generous use of coneflowers, echinacea. We do lavender. We'll have black-eyed Susans, any number of things that can attract different pollinators. In pest mitigation, we're all about trying to do things that are very cheap, very economical, and take advantage of what's on the farm. What you see up here with the cans and the painted cans and the Vaseline, that was a hack we talked about at a previous Oak conference. But if you go to any of your farm stores, you'll find the little yellow cards, a little sticky tape kind of thing to hang up so you can attract the cabbage moths, the white flies, and so forth. We've done it where you don't have to buy any of that. We take cans because we generate cans in our cannery with tomato paste in them and other things. But any kind of can, any kind of container would work. Paint it yellow, which is an attractant. You put a bag over the top of it, as you see in the lower right-hand corner there. And those are simple, thin produce bags that you can get every time you go to the grocery store, or any kind of a simple bag. Cover that bag with Vaseline, and we take and set those then on top of a step-in post, or sometimes we'll put them right down on the ground in the field, and they do an excellent job of attracting and trapping bugs. When that gets covered with bugs, you pull the plastic bag off, you throw it away, you put a new bag on, new Vaseline, and you're good to go. And we use those year after year after year, and they're very effective.
So you just rub the Vaseline on the plastic bag?
Yes, the question was, and I'll repeat the questions because we're trying to record, but the question was, do we just rub the Vaseline on the bag? Yes, we do. And Vaseline at the dollar store is $1.25 for a little jar, so it's pretty economical. In the lower left-hand corner, it's a little hard to see, but you can kind of see a white line going along there on the crop row. We put a series of step-in posts in, and then we get a white nylon like tape and string that between the posts, and then we spray on there a mixture of essential oils and some cayenne pepper juice that we make by just taking our cayenne peppers that we grow that we don't put in our hot sauce, or the stems and trims, we grind them up, we'll liquefy them, and we'll spray that on that tape. And repeat that, depending upon how much rain you get, we repeat it every few weeks. That does a pretty good job of keeping the deer out when you're at a 30-inch high level above the ground, because that's muzzle height on the deer. And we've been successful to the point where last year when our son and grandson went out hunting and we were done growing and the tape was down and everything, the deer came out of the woods, they came up to the point where that tape was, they walked completely around to get to where they were going. So they were already trained about the tape. Yes, I'm sorry.
So I have a question. So you, for about the tape, you were talking about how it prevents the deer from going around the crops. We use a similar thing, but we use hair. You get this load of hair and you put it around, and essentially it uses, because deer, they don't like the smell of humans, so they would walk around and they would basically leave the whole crops. And I was wanting to know if you had ever heard of that.
I have not heard of it. The question was, what was the you say the hair?
Yeah, hair.
He
Okay.
uses hair.
Yes, we have. The question was about using hair, and our daughter-in-law is a beautician, so she has a ready supply of hair. And we have used that sometimes to sprinkle human hair around, which, again, the deer don't like. So that's just another kind of neat little thing you can do. Yes, sir.
How do you make your hot pepper spray? Do you try and concentrate it with alcohol or with vinegar or anything like that?
The hot pepper spray that we do, we will, the way we make it is take the cayenne peppers, we take the stem ends off, we will emulsify those in a food processor, and then we will add to that some water, usually a little bit of apple cider vinegar to help knock it down a little bit, and some Dawn dishwashing liquid, which acts as a surfactant so it'll stick.
Nice.
And you have to be careful when you're spraying it. You have to get a fairly generous nozzle because it is going to tend to clog in that nozzle, but it's worked pretty well for us. Yes, ma'am.
Which essential oils do you use?
Question was, which essential oils do we use? Usually peppermint oil is kind of the fallback, but I think we've got some others too.
I've used lavender, that works very well, but our biggest go-to is peppermint oil. But as with anything like cayenne pepper spray or peppermint oil, if you're going to put it directly on the plant, make sure you dilute it. But typically on this setup where we have the tape around the field, you know, we might go with pepper spray. And then if a rainstorm comes and we need to recoat it, we might go with peppermint oil. You know, we kind of mix it up to keep the deer where they should be. Another thing that we've been successful with this method is we'll take dried blood meal. I'm sure you've all heard of that. We basically just put that in little cloth pouches and hang that on posts and around on the fence, and that also keeps the deer off. Deer and turkey seem to be our biggest predators on our farm. Even though we have people that hunt our farm for deer, it always seems to be one of our biggest challenges. And if we can get those plants up mature enough to where they're more bitter, and then of course when the tomatoes come on, if we can kind of keep them off, we just have to be diligent, I think. Every time there's a rainstorm, we're kind of recoating it.
And the deer will get used to something, so you have to be kind of changing your method periodically. So, yes, ma'am.
Maybe I have super aggressive deer, but what would keep them from just jumping that little white fence?
Well, sometimes they do, but deer will come up and they're curious and they'll kind of come up and that's at their muzzle height, they smell that and they retreat. But sometimes they will jump it.
And we have found that the younger ones will jump it. So another thing you can do, which has worked well for us, is we'll take like the caution tape you see that you get wherever, and if you go crossways, make a big X in the field, typically if they see that, they won't jump into the square. Now, granted, you do have to work in smaller plots in order to accomplish this. But we have just found that the step-in post, you know, you can pick them up, you can move them. A lot of times we'll use those in one of our fenced-in fields if we end up maybe with cabbage moths. We'll step the post in, we'll put a rope between it, I'll take pieces of material and put peppermint oil on it, and that keeps the cabbage moths away. So we've had success a lot with this, but you know, there are times where you'll get a rodent that it doesn't work for, you know? So then you have to think of alternative methods.
It's a never-ending battle, as you probably know.
Another thing we use on our farm is we use a silicon watering solution. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but we're fortunate enough that we have an herb on our farm called horsetail. Along with that, we have bamboo. Both of those are very high in silicon. And what we'll do with that a lot of times is we cut that down, we let it dry out, we take that and we burn it into an ash. And then you can take that ash, and from that you can make that into like a compost tea, where you would soak it in water, strain it out, and then water your plants with it. It's very effective if you spray it on the plant.
The other thing that ash does from the scouring rush, horsetail, or from the bamboo, because it has these silica-like properties, that's sprayed on as a dust with just one of those dusters that you see, will help deter soft-bodied insects because it cuts through their skin, their outer surface.
You know, kind of think of it, kind of think of it like diatomaceous earth. It does the same thing, but this is a resource that we have on our farm, and it's almost like a free input to us. Requires a little bit of time to cut it down, a little bit of time to burn it, but it's worth it in the end.
And then, of course, from weed control, we do pretty much the standard things. We use a lot of landscape fabric that we roll out in 3-foot wide swaths. We cut holes in it and plant in it. As far as cutting the holes, you can use a propane torch and burn a hole. We've taken a can on the end of a shaft and heated that and literally burned the circles in, or simply cut them with a scissors. So there's a number of ways you can do, and then we reuse that year after year. We use a lot of composted leaf matter because we've got 50-some acres heavily wooded. So we will save our leaves, we'll grind it up, we'll use a lot of composted leaf matter as some weed control. Yes, sir?
Do you have any areas that you use no-till methods on?
We do have a field, we call it Field 3 because we're in 3 different fields, and we do have a field that we're very successful growing potatoes in every year, and it's our early potatoes, it's down next to the creek. We don't really till that particular field that often. We'll put a cover crop in, and then basically we plant our potatoes in it. But then again, we're kind of disturbing that soil because we've got the trench, we've got the potato, we're hilling it up. But as far as strictly no-till, we do not do that on our farm because we have clay soil, we've not been successful. So what we employ is like minimal till. So a lot of times in the spring, especially in Field 2, we'll get that field ready to go, we'll disc it, we'll till it, we let it set, we let any cover crop in there die off. And then when we plant it, we put this landscape fabric down. And we just, every year we roll it up so we can get our cover crop in there, we tag it, we put it down. A lot of times on that, we put the leaf matter on it to hold it in place. Because if you don't stake it or do something, the wind's gonna get it, it's gonna blow it off. So we do that as a kind of to support the minimum till. But there really isn't any of our fields that we do not till. We do have one greenhouse that we grow greens in, and we usually do not till it. We just kind of take something and last year I cover cropped it, and we'll take that cover crop off and let it die, put the landscape fabric down and get our greens in that.
Well, I just asked, I've got several plots that I've now have established permanent beds in, and I haven't tilled them for a couple of years, and just add compost to very broad fork it, and I've just about totally eliminated grass and weeds out of it. I mean, you still get some, but it's not the stuff you can go through and just pluck out.
One of the challenges that we faced on our farm is that we're certified organic, and we are certified from OFA, which is an Ohio organization. And one of the challenges that we've had over the years is finding organic straw, organic things that we can put in our field. So should we ever move away from that organic certification, I think it might be easier for us to go to the no-till. You know, I've watched several things from Elliot Coleman where he has almost completely gone to that. So.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, your place sounds just like mine. Lots of hills, lots of clay. We do in the spring till. I use a lot of newspaper. The problem with newspaper now is getting just black and white.
Yes.
But I use a lot of that, put hay on top of it, or when we mow, we put it in grass sweeper, and I use that on top. So, because I do use some of the mulch, the landscape fabric under where I have stuff spreading out. But between the rows, what I've done now is I can't put the newspaper down, then I put grass on top of it so I don't have to take it out in the fall. And then I don't have to put cover crop on those areas where the newspaper is covering it and the other stuff is good. I also have a lot of hay, so I put that down. So then that just goes into the soil, and I keep it covered in the winter.
And then in that walk path where you're putting these materials, does that become a permanent walk path, or do you flip that over to become your...
It just, because it kind of self-seeds itself between the hay down.
Okay,
The hay kind of self-seeds by the time the crops are gone.
okay.
And then where I have places like lettuce and things like that where it's harder to do that, that's where we usually put the cover crop down. And I just put, their hard red winter wheat down in the fall. And then we do till it. We have the same kind of soil you do, and lots of rocks that still come up because of a lot of glacier streets. So.
Yeah, that's exactly what we have. Now, what we will do, oftentimes, we will have several rows of plantings, and then we will have about a 6-foot wide swath that we keep in grass, and so we can drive our gator down there, or harvesting, that sort of thing. And then in the subsequent year, we will take that grass thing and we will plant in that, and what was planted previously will become grass, so that we're kind of cover cropping and flipping as we go. And it also helps control the erosion, because again, our fields aren't necessarily, well, the one field is dead flat, but the field in the upper field has a different slope to it. We get a hard rain, you get a washout. So if you've got some grassy strips and so forth, you help control that washout on it. Now we're going to talk for just a minute about some repurpose hacks in here. So as I mentioned, we have a 13-year-old grandson, so those two pieces there are quite old, but they come in handy. And you'd be surprised how much that saves by using that for your picking and harvesting. And the stroller on the right, it still has the ability to put the canopy on it if we need to shade, like we're picking lettuce and we don't want to sit down there in the sun. Also, that platform is such that we can put 3 milk crates on there if we're carrying something else in there that doesn't go in a harvest basket and that sort of thing. So those are kind of neat, kind of fun. And if you don't happen to have them from your own children or grandchildren, oftentimes you can see them sitting on the side of the road. Somebody wants to throw them out or something, and they're great to repurpose in that way. And then talk a little bit about some raised beds. We have traditionally planted in the soil, but one of the things with our cannery, we buy 55-gallon drums of certified organic extra virgin olive oil. And so we end up having a collection of 55-gallon drums, which I would definitely not recommend doing this by going and getting a petroleum-filled drum, but if you can get your hands on food product drums, which we did, cut them in half. Like with most people, we have hose and the hose starts to wear out, so we take some hose there and cut that in lengths. The drums, they almost all have 2 holes in the top, a large bung hole and a small hole. And so cut the halves so that you have those holes in each half. Put a little caulking around the inside of the hole, put a piece of screen wire on that. Fill it up with gravel for drainage. We put landscape fabric on top of the gravel so the dirt doesn't get down in and clog the gravel up, and then set those in a line on some pallets. We take the garden hose that we've slit, we put that on top of the metal to protect the edge, mainly from us when you're trying to work, and then plant in them. And we do, because we have clay soil and lots of rocks, those are very nice for doing carrots, beets, green onions, and so forth, because we can put in there our mixture of our compost, some soil, some peat, and some vermiculite. We put them on pallets so that we can move them if we have to. We got forks on the front of the tractor or the skid steer. We can come in, pick it up, and take it wherever we want to. But we generally keep them in a line. We also, it's not shown there, but the house we had years ago, we replaced all the sliding doors and so forth, so we kept the old ones, and then we've collected them from neighbors and so forth, so we take those, we can set them on top, and we can actually have little mini greenhouses and start well ahead of time by, which we did. This year we've got our beets and carrots. That was some time ago. The beets and carrots are up now nicely, but that's just another way to take advantage of some materials that are laying around the farm and create a usable growing area for it. Yes, ma'am.
If you mentioned you grew your carrots in there, I was actually going to ask, because you mentioned that carrots and other vegetables go well together, but the soil being so clay, how do you get the carrots to grow? So I was going to ask, what carrots do you recommend? The clay soil, but then you're putting in the drums.
Well, we grow them this way. We have grown them in our clay soil, but what I recommend is they have, there's several varieties of carrots. So the short, stubbier carrots, grow those. Do not try and grow the long carrots, or you will come out with some real funky looking carrots.
And a lot of times what we do in the fall is we do the same thing that this gentleman does. We actually put our leaf matter there, and we'll kind of hill up a section, and we put all of that stuff in there and leave it through the winter. And then we come back in the spring and we just plant in it. We don't disturb it. So we kind of keep rows of carrots going that way also. Yeah, so we can build it up. But it is a challenge, you're right, because sometimes they get really interesting shapes on them when you're in that clay soil. Yeah.
Well, when we used to do a farm market, which we did for 12 years, we no longer do. Now we do door-to-door delivery. But we would take our funky carrots and funky potatoes, and the kids loved them at the farm market. So it was a nice thing to have a whole basket full of just funky-looking shapes and give them to the kids. And Mom and Dad would buy carrots, and the kids would get something really cool to play with. So.
Yes.
Those seem to penetrate the clay.
They do.
And they smell weird when they die.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
Actually, I have the same thing, the short and sweet carrots.
Yes.
But it's very interesting, the farm market, I can tell who has a real background, who doesn't. They'll say, your carrots look like real carrots.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
This isn't a question, but I have another process. I don't think I'm crazy. We have 55-gallon drums, the polypropylene. If anybody wants one, look me up afterward and I'll tell you where you're coming from.
Okay. You want to?
Yeah, you want to repeat that?
This lady back here has 55-gallon drums, correct? Plastic drums that you're willing to part with for free for. Yeah. So if you're interested in doing something like this, she has some 55-gallon drums that she's willing to part with They're plastic. You can basically rig up and do the exact same thing we've done here.
Yes, ma'am.
You have pallets. This lady here has pallets she's willing to get rid of. So there you go. You're halfway there, you know.
So you use the hose to line the edge so it's not sharp?
Yes.
Because
Yeah, we just take the hose and I just slit it and put it over there just as a protection for, you know, whatever.
Because it's nice to get started early and our fields are too wet. And I'm one of these people that as soon as it's warm, I want to get in the field, and then this part's dry and this part's wet and this part's dry. So what do I have? I have a row here, I have nothing, and it really messes with the tractor driver. They don't like that. When they come out there to disc and to do whatever, they want to do the whole field. So this allows us to kind of get an early start on some of those long lead time things. So Jeff put the hose around there because we have those big glass doors that we're setting on top of it, and then that just keeps it from getting scratched. And it's easier to move them off if we have to water. But we were really surprised at how quick the germination, I mean, weather in our area has been absolutely nuts this spring, and I'm sure it has been for everybody else here. But with the cold temperatures, the warm temperatures, it was just a way for us to just do something that kind of got us, because our seed room is full, our greenhouse is full, and we thought, well, we kind of need some other way to go here. Any other comments,
Okay.
questions?
That's the end of our formal presentation. We're well ahead of time, but any other questions or comments or discussion, we're happy to entertain.
Where's the lady with the drums located?
In Florence in the industrial park?
The lady with the drums is in Florence in the industrial park.
Yeah, near Mazac. So, I'm gonna grab you.
Do you want to stand up and wave to him maybe? So she's back in the back with the nice Amy.
If you maybe at lunchtime or something, then I can give you the information and stuff.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
You talk about your companion planting and things. Are you planting like row, crop row, companion back and forth? Do you intermix things? Like how do you lay that out?
Okay,
Yes,
the
we
question
actually-
was
I'm sorry.
on companion planting, as to how it's laid out, whether it's interspersed or row by row. Both is the short answer, but for like marigolds and that sort of stuff, we will interplant those, or we'll plant a radish along with some of our other crops. But on the perimeter of the field is where we will have lavender and rosemary and some of those herbs to help out with. So it's kind of both.
Yeah, because those are going to come back every year. So what we have along the outer of our garden is we'll have the purple coneflower, the black-eyed Susies, the lavender, the rosemary, the thyme, the oregano. And then in the garden itself, we'll do a row of carrots, and the row next to it will be a row of tomatoes because they go together. Another thing that we've been successful with is everybody probably at some point has had to deal with a cucumber beetle. So I read an article in the Tomatoes Love Carrot book about how that if you will put paper down around your cucumbers, it keeps the cucumber beetle from coming up out of the ground. So along with that, it's said in the book, for every hill of cucumber that you plant, or zucchini, drop a radish seed in there. And that's what we do. So as we drop the cucumber seed, and sometimes we do that, we'll start those earlier just to get ahead. And we put a radish seed in there, and then we'll put paper around it or the landscaping fabric. On top of that, we'll put the composted leaf matter. So that's been very successful for us also in dealing with that cucumber beetle. Also, along with that, next to those plants, you can do the yellow can with a plastic bag and the Vaseline, and then as they come up at night, they'll fly into that and get stuck. One thing we're very big on is crop rotation, and we rotate our crops every single year. Under the organic rules, you have to do it every 3 years, but we do it every year, and we have been very successful with powdery mildew, pest, disease, those types of things.
Okay, yes, sir.
Two questions. One, if you could, can you go back to the slide where you talked about the plants that attract the pollinators? And then my second question is, do you guys have hives on the farm? And how do you maintain them?
Okay, he wanted us to go back to the slide about the pollinators, and the next question is, do we have beehives on the farm?
Yes, ma'am.
We do not have beehives. We don't have the hives, and we have extended that privilege to a couple of people who put hives on our farm. And it ended up, for us, just being a disaster for various reasons. The biggest reason is we're a working farm, we're trying to work, and people want to keep the bees, and they want to come out at all crazy hours of the day, and we're trying to run tractors and keep their kids, and it just didn't work for us. But we do have you heard of the mason bee, the little houses you make and you put up? We have those around our farm. And we just plant all of these wonderful crops, and we have so many butterflies and bees that we can't believe it. But having said that, we do not use chemicals on our farm. You know, we don't use Roundup. Ugh, you know, and when it comes to the grass in the driveway and all of that, we use vinegar, Dawn dish soap, and a little bit of salt, sea salt, and we mix that together, let that settle, and that's how we control that. So, and then again, we kind of go back to, we're raising crops, we're raising herbs, we're working in the cannery. You know, we just didn't really want to take on bees as another responsibility.
Yes, sir.
It's not, I don't know if they pollinate or not, but something I found out last year is mammoth dill planted in amongst your tomatoes. Mammoth dill attracts the parasitic wasp.
Oh,
Yes.
Okay, did everybody hear that? The mammoth dill attracts the parasitic wasp.
Which eats the horn.
Let's see. I had 1,200 tomato plants in a 100-foot high tunnel, and I had damage to 3 tomato plants from hornworms, and it was very minimal.
Excellent to
I
know.
found a lot of them in there that were desiccated and had the eggs on them, but yeah, I was surprised. I just kind of threw them in because it was a good companion plant. But when it makes a head, it really attracts those parasitic wasps, and I was tickled.
A lot of times we'll intercrop our basil in with our tomatoes, you know, everybody does that. Or we'll plant a whole row of basil on one side of the tomatoes, we'll do the carrots, then we'll come back with a whole row of cilantro.
My cilantro just went too fast.
It will go too fast if it gets too warm. You know, it's a cool crop. It likes to be wet, you know, whereas rosemary and lavender, they do not want wet feet. They want to dry out. But cilantro will bolt on you, and sometimes it's the variety that you're growing. But a lot of times in the summer, on our drums, when we take those crops out and we harvest those, a lot of times it's getting close to getting warm. So I will go ahead and put cilantro in there because they're on skids. So we can pick those up and put those in the shade, and then we can actually have a steady supply of that herb well into the summer. So that works well for us.
okay, yes, ma'am.
If you were going to let part of your field rest for a year, what cover crop would you put on it so that you didn't have to mess with it, but it didn't get out of control?
Okay, the question is, if we were going to rest a portion of our field and let it lay fallow for a year, what would we plant there? We do that. We have done that consistently for 18 years because we believe in resting the land. And actually, this winter was probably the first time in 4 years that we did not grow through the winter. We rested the greenhouse, we rested all of our fields. So we move that portion of our field around. We're fortunate to have a nice big 5-acre field where we can move that around. Also with a landscaping fabric, it has allowed us to get our rows closer together. So typically in the fallow part, in the winter we'll put a wheat, in the summer we'll try to put like a buckwheat. This year, we're going to go back with some sunflower and things like that, just enough to attract the bees, the butterflies, and the birds in that particular field. Did you want to address that also?
And you just let it grow, and then it kind of dies, and you just let it die, and then...
We plant that when we plant out our field. We have this old 1800s potato planter that we got at an auction for $200. This thing has the metal wheels. This is like a masterpiece to work with. We plant all of our tomatoes, all of our spaghetti squash, those types of seed with this thing. And then that field, the portion of the field that we're laying fallow has been disc. And we basically just broadcast our seed on there, let that seed come up. You know, sometimes in the fall, the deer might bed down in it, but literally, we leave that lay. We just let it rest. We don't work it. We don't do anything to it. And then come next year, we figure out in our planting plans, you know, which is the next section that gets to rest. We're fortunate enough that we have enough field space that we can do that. Now, sometimes that's not possible, you know. So what I always tell people, when that's not possible, be kind to the land. You know, the land is like your body. Your body needs rest. You need nutrients. Think of your garden. Think of the things you're doing in your grass and around your field, in your backyard. Think of it as your body and how you would treat your body. And that's kind of what I say to people.
Yes. So at the beginning, you said just kind of briefly that you had intended to start with sort of a shade crop, and then you've ended up making a lot of value-added products. Would you talk just for a minute about like when you started the farm? You've been doing it for what, 18 years?
Okay.
So like what your transition was from that kind of your initial plan to what's really worked for you?
Okay, the question was, how did we come to where we are now, and how did we transition from what we started, which was some shade-loving herbs, to where we're at? So, yes, when we were initially looking for property, this was kind of a joint venture between us and our son and daughter-in-law, and we found this nice 51-acre piece that was wooded. The property where we lived before, Sandy had started growing ginseng, so she was looking for some place where she could do more ginseng and we could do some other shade-loving herbs, and this provided that because it was wooded, it was hilly, and so forth. The property already had a half-acre plot that was fenced in with 8-foot-high fence, so that was nice to keep the deer out. So we thought, well, we can just grow some vegetables for our own use and so forth. We had a relationship with a natural food store in Cincinnati where we had been doing some business, just personal business, and she had expressed an interest that if we were going to be growing, why don't we supply her with some fresh vegetables? Our son said, well, as long as we're going to do this, you know, and we concurred that let's be good with what we're doing and be good stewards of this, and let's do it organically. Because the people we bought the property from had been growing organically, not certified, but had been growing organically, they gave us an affidavit, which we took to the certifying agency, and we got certified organic the moment we bought the property, rather than having to do the 3-year transition wait that is traditional. So we purchased the property during the winter of 2003, spring of 2004, we started doing some growing. We got our organic certification. Again, this health food store that we had a relationship with, she had a little lunch counter there, and she was complaining about how she would get soup and products and never quite sure what they were and so forth, and could we make some things for her? Because, little side story, we have a background, owned a restaurant and that sort of thing. My professional career was in food production plants and facilities all over the country, so we sort of had an affinity for what that would mean to try and do something. But we didn't have a facility at that point. So we had a friend who had a restaurant that did breakfast and lunch. So we said, hey, can we use your place in the evening, and we'll make some soups and salsa and so forth. So that was fine, but to take all your stuff and lug it 10 miles into this place and set up and cook and then go back home was not too practical. So we built a cannery on the farm. Again, we had the skills, we had the people to do it. So we built it ourselves from scratch. Very small, basically a two-car garage package that we converted with concrete floors and epoxy and fiberglass coated wall panels and all the stuff you would need to do a mini production. And it's done stovetop in 4.5 gallon stainless steel pots and so forth. So it was kind of an evolution thing of not really having a plan to start with that said, oh, we're going to do value-added products and we're going to do this, but as people ask us, and we said, sure, we can do that, not necessarily knowing exactly what we were going to do, but having enough background, familiarity, and comfort with the various aspects that we thought we could pull it off. And then it has evolved as the years have gone on. We got involved in doing a farm market, so we grew a variety of vegetables to speak to that farm market business. We did the farm market for about 12 years. We found the customer base of that farm market was kind of eroding, and we had a lot of people come up to us and say, you know, hey, it's great, we love a farm market, but we just can't always get here. It was a Sunday morning farm market in Cincinnati, and it was very successful. We did quite well at it, but we saw the customer base dwindling. So we decided to do some limited home delivery, and that took off better than we had ever experienced. We have 130 to 150 people on our mailing list. We send out an email on Friday afternoon. We give them until Monday morning to respond. We have an online store on our website. They go there, they pick out what they want. We assemble the orders. We converted the back of the barn into a pack shed and a preparation area. We built a small cold storage room. We're just expanding that now. We're doubling the size of it. That'll be complete here shortly. And so every Wednesday is our delivery day. We load up the van and we make a circular route around, and we literally deliver to people's door for a small fee. And that's kind of where we've evolved from buying some property to do some shade-loving herbs to now having a cannery operation and growing some fresh produce. And depending on the year, the fresh produce and the value-added products are about a 50-50 thing. Sometimes they're 35-65, that kind of thing, but it varies as people's tastes vary and people come and go in our what we call our direct buy group, which is kind of a CSA sort of thing.
And one of the shade-loving herbs that we started with is ginseng. And if you know anything about ginseng, it lays on the ground for 5 years or more, and then you can harvest the root, dry it, sell it off. Or you can collect the berry that forms at the top of it, which has 2 seeds. You can either sell off that seed after it's stratified, or you can put it back in the ground. We have chosen to put ours back into the ground. So over the years, we have sold the leaf off when we harvest it in the fall for tea. We sell it to a kombucha maker. We also sell him our lemon balm and lavender from our herbs, and he makes a kombucha out of that. So that's been very good for us. Our ginseng has now been in the ground about 17 years. So this fall, over the years, I've dug a root here and there, but this fall we will probably dig the most of it out because we're not getting younger. And we also know that when you do ginseng, you're doing it in the woods, you're doing it on a slope. So, you know, you're on your knees a lot digging the root out.
But one advantage to being small is you keep yourself in this constant mode of pivoting, you know, reflecting what's happening in the marketplace out there, the feedback you're getting from your customers, what works one year doesn't work another year, and so you stay very fluid and you pivot, always trying to maintain some kind of a core and a base, but being open to making some changes and tweaking what you're doing in terms of what you're growing or the product you're making or whatever it might be.
It's been a wild ride, but it's been good. Okay. I mean, it has.
You had a question?
Yeah, so do you guys find that since you're doing the delivery route, with the higher price of gas, are you having to raise any prices this year? Or how have you seen prices
Oh, yeah.
when you started versus now?
Couple examples. We put our product in glass jars. Glass jar prices went up last year. We ordered the first part of this year. 30 cents a jar was the increase. 30 cents per jar, not per case, per jar. we kept a very nominal delivery charge of $3 per order because we set it up in kind of a loop and a neighborhood thing, so we could do quite well at that. This year we're at $4 because gasoline is at $4 a gallon, give or take a few cents. Now, if the gas price goes down, we'll adjust. But yes, we've had to raise our prices pretty much across the board. You know, while we grow a lot that goes into our product, we also have to buy sugar, we have to buy tomato paste, we have to buy olive oil, and a few of those things. Our olive oil, as I said, comes in a 55-gallon drum from Tunisia by way of an importer in New Jersey. It ain't cheap. And it goes up and up and up. So,
well, and another thing, when we did our home delivery direct buy, we set that up with our retail stores because we're in several retail stores, Jungle Gyms, Pipkins, Susan's Natural World, Miami, and that's how we kind of targeted the area that we were going to sell to. And one of the things we did is we reached out to the local library and we said to them, hey, we've got this story, can we come tell our story? And they were like, yeah, this is great. And the beautiful part about the library is they do all your advertisement for you. They have all of these wonderful readers on their list and they send it out there. So what we did was our retail stores drove our direct buy radius, because we're charging those folks already. So, you know, and then if we would get somebody in a new neighborhood, we would say to that person, hey, we want your neighbors, and we would target that cul-de-sac. And that's been very successful for us.
Going back to what I said about being flexible and fluid, also one very important thing, do not be afraid to say no.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of like our delivery. Somebody calls us from the far west side of Cincinnati, and we tell them, you know, gosh, we'd love to sell you this stuff, but you know, we can't charge you enough in delivery fee to do that. It's just not practical. But here's another farm you might talk to. You might be able to get something. So don't be afraid to say no. You know, take care of yourself. Have a good business sense about it. You know, follow your passion, but do it from a business standpoint, and don't be afraid to say no sometimes.
Yeah, we always say run your business. Don't let your business run you.
So, yes, ma'am. How do we collect the leaves?
Leaves.
The leaf matter.
Yeah.
How do we collect the leaf matter?
A couple of ways. We've had a big vacuum thing that sucks them up and so forth, and we can mulch them. That's fine, except it sometimes sucks up rocks, large branches, other sorts of things, which plays havoc with the impeller on the unit. So in many cases, we simply do it the old-fashioned way. We take the front scoop on the tractor and we will simply rake down that, and then we will go dump them into a pile where we'll flip them and let them kind of compost and break down. So